Hey folks, thanks for coming back. So this presentation is based on footage that we secured this past Saturday, February the 10th, 2024, at about 10 minutes before 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Let's get right to it. So this is how all this went down. This plane, the big one, which is now red, we were spotting this plane and keeping eyes on it. It's a Lufthansa flight from Munich, and it passed over the 605 freeway, and we were at elevation in the San Gabriel Mountains, and we were tracking it for reasons that are immaterial at this point. And this was the angle we had. You can see the 605 freeway is in the center of this picture, and this is sort of our reference point, which is why we're pointing it out to you now. And so the one other thing we want to touch on is this. In the video we produced a few weeks ago, which was fast is an understatement, we talked about having to make a decision. We were following a helicopter and then decided to switch off to another plane, and it worked out because we were still able, luckily, to capture this, whatever that is, buzz that helicopter. But the point is, there was a decision to be made, and we lucked out because we were following the plane, and we caught that buzzing before the helicopter left the frame. In this situation, we were following the Lufthansa flight and then noticed something else and had to again decide. And you see the two up there, and we left the Lufthansa flight and focused on what was coming down and towards us because it didn't seem to be moving naturally. That's the best I can put it. It caught our eye, and it didn't seem prosaic, I guess would be the word. It didn't seem like anything that we were used to seeing or had an explanation for. So we decided to follow it, and so obviously we left the plane, and we had a new target, and we followed it as much as we could. And suffice it to say, we think that was a really good decision. Or at least it paid off, because there are no answers thus far for what this is. And obviously we'll get into it a little more, but we wanted to point out how it came to be that we filmed this. And so this is the first half of its sort of controlled fall. And I don't even want to say fall. It was like it's tumbling, but, it was coming at an angle. Things fall down, not across. And there wasn't a crosswind. And it looks like some sort of aerial trash, but again, it isn't, clearly. And it's not traveling in any aerodynamic-based manner either, which is different. So then there's another part of this, which is like a second half of it, where it's rotating like a record player. And obviously it's very different. It's not tumbling anymore. Still at that angle, still coming across, but very much under control. And obviously now shining and have these other features. So anyway, we tried to figure out what changed between the tumble and the rotation. So we went back to the video and found the point where it shifted. And what we found was the moment it transitions, it lets out this tiny little light right there. It comes out of it and goes straight south. And the minute that happens, this thing stabilizes and goes away from the tumble and then into the rotation. And that's what we're able to identify. Here it is again, just closer because it's awesome to see. So check it out. Clearly it's not aerial trash, but it is changing shape, even though it's under control and seemingly tumbling and then eventually rotating like this. And this is as close as we could really come, in terms of zooming in and scrubbing through the original. But at points it looks like a drone. At other points it looks like a puffer fish. Sometimes it looks like a helicopter, like fishtailing. And obviously earlier on it just looks like aerial trash or something else. But none of those are what this is. And I should also point out, this seemed to come into the mountain we were on. I know there's houses behind it, but it seemed to come into the mountains rather. And then this thing happened before we even zoomed in on the Lufthansa flight, which you can see in the back. But I'm pointing this out because even though this thing is blurry, it's a blurred version of something that's not normal. Because even when, a housefly or a bumblebee or a bird gets blurry, it's still a blurry version of itself, and you can tell. That thing was not. And then obviously here are the fast flyers, which I'm sure you all saw in the middle of these videos. We're just pointing them out. This was at the 9-second mark because they happened also. Hey folks, welcome back. So that was this Saturday at 2:49 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And the video lasted about a minute and a half, or I should say the experience really, from the moment that we picked up the Lufthansa flight just past the 605 to the point where that thing seemed to terminate at the base of the mountain we were on. Obviously it leaves us with questions more than we have answers for sure. And the most obvious question is, what is it, or what was it? But frankly, what's equally obvious to us is that nobody knows. That was clearly something that's unknown and unidentified. And so it seems like it's more prudent for purposes of advancing this discussion to leave the people to discuss amongst themselves what they think it is, if they think it's prosaic. In other words, please don't send us comments about birds and bugs. It's a non-starter, and it detracts from the dialogue and the real people that really want to discuss this. In any event, it does lead to other questions though. And if you presume that it's prosaic, then really the questions start with the 4 C's, which are who owns it, meaning that what country, what corporation, what community, or what citizen. Who is responsible for whatever that was? If it's prosaic, then somebody's responsible for it, because it's not an animal. It's not like zoologically undetermined. That's technology. So, well, I shouldn't say technology. I'll just say it's no animal that we're aware of, and it didn't operate like any terrestrial animal. So if we assume it's not an animal, then it comes back to, if it's prosaic, then who's responsible for that? Who is that? The other question that arose for us really is, if you presume that it's advanced technology of some sort, which seems to be a consideration in this space for a good number of people, then our first question would be, well, what is its purpose? What was it doing? Is it reconnaissance? Who knows? I don't need to give examples, but that is the question. What is it? And then the obvious, more unsettling question is, why was it deployed over civilian airspace, or over a city in civilian airspace? And this is not wartime Los Angeles. What was it doing? Why is it there? And that was an airspace incursion. There's no question about that. And there's also no question that it was reached heights above and then at the level of commercial flight. Why, if it's advanced tech, why is it being deployed here and now? And also, if it's advanced tech, how much was the R&D on that? How many tax dollars went to figure that out and generate something that behaves in such a way, with the lack of aerodynamics and all of the things that we witnessed in that video? How much did that cost to figure out, and who authorized that? You know, the taxpayer dollars to come up with something like that must be insane, and somebody had to ratify that expenditure, and I'd like to know who it is, if in fact it's advanced tech. And I'd like to know what else it can do, because it's got to be able to do more than what we captured it doing, which is a lot of nothing. So, you know, maybe it is advanced tech, but the point is, it leads to questions that require answers. Yeah, I mean, and you know, the other thing too is, so we're told or expected to believe that our airspace is secure, and that aviators, both private, commercial, military, and the passengers and the flight attendants, everybody on these planes, we're all made or expected to believe that this is safe airspace, and we're basically untouchable in a non-wartime period. And yet something like this happens, and that's clearly an incursion, and there was no security response that we saw. Obviously we would have documented it. There weren't any F-18s chasing this thing. There were no helicopters surrounding it. There's nothing going on. Yet it was up there around our commercial planes with our citizens on it, and citizens of Germany with that Lufthansa flight. I mean, you know, and that's another thing. Is there really an investigatory arm for these incursions? Because if so, did they contact Lufthansa? Did they demand the manifest and request any video footage from anybody sitting on the right side of that airplane that had a very clear view of that? Have they checked with the FAA to see if that was registered on radar? I mean, how high was it initially? We only caught it at a certain point. It didn't emanate from that point. Presumably it came from somewhere, and it seems like it came from higher up. So all of these questions come to pass, and even more. These are just a few of the many that occurred to us. But again, if there's a real investigatory arm addressing these things that are in our airspace, whether it be what we videoed what we videoed in this presentation on Saturday, or if it's the fast flyer situation, or if it's these long thin rods that look like pencils flying through the sky at thousands of miles an hour, or the things we caught in the fast is an understatement video. All of these different things that we're capturing require legitimate investigation, and maybe it is happening. But then on the other hand, I would think we would be a part of that investigation. Somebody might want to say, hey, how are you guys getting all of this, and what else do you have? Can we see the rest of your footage? Because there is more, and some of it is pretty different, and we'll get to it in future presentations. But my point is, if there's a real investigation underway when there are these incursions, what does it look like? Who's doing it? I mean, like I said, did this show up on radar? Does the FAA know that even happened? There's a lot of questions that something like this yields, and I feel like the honest truth is that they're not even being asked, because the reality is nobody knows what these things are. And like I've mentioned in prior presentations, the evidence seems to really suggest that we're being allowed or permitted to operate in what we think is our own airspace. That's what it seems like. Anyway, like I said, there's, you know, tons of questions, tons of nuanced, layered questions and concerns also. But, you know, those are for other people to assess. We're just doing what we can to bring this topic to the fore and this evidence to the masses, because as I've said many times now, there's a lot going on in the airspace in Los Angeles. Thanks for joining us.